Okay, we're back. It's June 10th, 4 o'clock, and I'm with my co-hosts Shane and Francesca. We are Future Proof Podcast by CoAI, and we're excited to sort of get into it. We are going to spend most of the time talking about Perplexity. We've all been using it and discussing it, and we think it's worth sharing what we have found. But before we go there, since it's June 10th, we all read this new press release from Apple talking about Apple introducing what they call Apple Intelligence, which is, I mean, it's only Apple could do that, which is talking about them adding a new generative models to their core iPhone, iPad, and Macintosh. And as you read the press release more, it reveals that they're going to be using OpenAI and ChatGPT, which we think is quite interesting. I mean, I'll turn it over to Shane or Francesca. What do you guys got to think about this?
Well, I first of all love that you said only Apple could call it Apple Intelligence. I love language. I love like sort of wordplay. I mean, that's sort of what brought me to AI in the first place in terms of, most of my background is in natural language processing. And just looking at the press release, Apple Intelligence, AI, as in not the artificial intelligence that we have all grown to know and love. And the tagline right under it says AI for the rest of us, which immediately puts Apple, is Apple declaring itself as separate from everyone else, all the players that we've been discussing the past few months. And off the bat, what strikes me in looking at the Apple Intelligence release is that they really seem to know their customer. The first few items that it discusses, it's about, personal style, personal, branding, your own context, and also privacy in AI. And I think that has been sort of the draw of the iPhone and various Apple products in recent years, and is probably the biggest concern that people have about AI, especially these large language models. And then you just keep scrolling down the page and you have these really, really beautiful, eye-catching demos, this really catchy language. It's really exciting because Apple, being one of the household tech companies that hasn't really made a splash in this space yet, compared to Microsoft and Google, even Amazon. So it's just really exciting to finally have that. And then you scroll all the way down to the page, and then finally you get this mention of ChatGPT. ChatGPT seamlessly integrated, and then in the smallest font ever, it then says, with ChatGPT from OpenAI integrated into Siri and writing tools, you get even more expertise, and it goes on. And I suppose that isn't really the way this story has been represented in all the other news coverage of it and on the OpenAI blog. And I was wondering if either of you had any thoughts about sort of the way Apple is approaching this Apple Intelligence and this partnership with OpenAI versus how maybe OpenAI is viewing it, or even the press is covering it, or even the consumers like us are perceiving everything that's unfolded today.
Well, I'm on the OpenAI website now, and they've got an entire page dedicated to this partnership. If that's any indication. I mean, my first thought was maybe finally Siri will get a little bit better. And I mean, people have trash talked Siri for years, saying that they never use it. I actually use Siri quite a bit if I'm asking for simple things like what's the weather. What's the weather in Venice? Although a lot of times it tells me the weather in Venice, Italy.
Italy, right.
You would think that it would know that I'm in California by now.
Yeah.
My second thought was, this is just a glimpse of the inevitable bad news to come for all the AI native hardware devices. And if you look at companies like Humane, I think a report came out, I think it was just a few days ago, that Humane is now looking to sell itself because of just lackluster reviews and market reception. And you're seeing similar news elsewhere for, devices like the Rabbit R1. I think a lot of people in the industry thought from day one, it's just a matter of time before the big device makers, namely Apple and Google, start to integrate a lot of these features natively, which makes you wonder what place does, a company like Rabbit or Humane or any of the other, hardware devices coming out. And I'm not sure they have a big place.
Yeah, I mean, those two products were just, to me, like, I don't know. I couldn't see me having another device to carry around to just do, chat GPT, so
Mm-hmm.
I was short on those that you mentioned, Shane, but I think that that I already carry a phone around. I do carry an Apple iPhone, and it makes perfectly logically sense that I would use that rather than a specialized product. But I think that the question I think Francesca put forth is like, it's kind of amazing that this company OpenAI is sort of powering both Microsoft and Apple's AI product strategy right now. I mean, I want to say that I don't work at either of those two companies, so I know they have probably a larger product strategy around their AI ambitions, and OpenAI might be filling a spot for a time being. But like, to do that as a company, the age of OpenAI, that's pretty like remarkable, right? I think that's for their team to win massive contracts with both the biggest tech companies in the world and seemingly like be ahead of them in their innovation in AI is really remarkable. I do though think that Apple, more so than maybe Microsoft, sort of owns like mass consumers, right? And so the way that they're going to be able to integrate like image generation into iMessage, could be really mind blowing, and it will be eventually immaterial to the consumer, like whether I'm using ChatGPT or Minstrel or blah blah blah, fill in the blanks, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like those are libraries, just like I don't really care what library any software vendor is using in my software right now. You know what I mean? It's just like it's immaterial. Right now it's very material. From the AI perspective, it's as a fan and looking at this, like, it's really cool to see OpenAI do so well. There's millions of libraries that are in Apple software. Most of them we don't care about. But I do think for the consumer, it will be really awesome for them to say like, like smiley face, and it could like generate a new smiley face for you. It's not like you're stuck with emojicon. So I think there's just a world that Apple can do for their consumer that OpenAI could never do. And I think
I think
cool.
Oh yeah, yes, and I was gonna say I jumped ahead of you because I was really excited by what you said, Anthony, and so the idea that, as Apple stated in this section about ChatGPT, the idea is that anyone can access ChatGPT for free without creating an account, and to me that's sort of like the goldmine for OpenAI. And the fact that you are moving yourself towards this reality of basically no barrier to entry for any Apple device user. And so, we talk about how widely consumed ChatGPT is, but as it existed, when it was first launched, and for the majority of people now, it is very much, you go on the ChatGPT interface, or you go in the app, you have your account, maybe you pay for a premium account, etc. And now you're getting to the point where it's embedded into Microsoft products without any sort of additional barrier to entry for you. You really just get access to that API in the existing product that you've already been using. And now it's the same for Apple. And it really just builds this idea of ChatGPT being accessed by so many different types of consumers now. I think of the way Copilot, when it is embedded in Microsoft, is very much for the productivity of your professional team. your team that's using Microsoft. Now you have people, the sort of everyday person doing their everyday task with their Apple iPhone. And like you said, it might just be completely undetectable at a certain point that you are engaging with this OpenAI product that you had maybe already been engaging with, but through your account, because now it's just on your iPhone, or it's just on your tablet. And I think that's really, really like such a breakthrough for OpenAI.
Yeah, I mean, but Shane, you might want to say a few things, but the last time I saw like a company, I was telling you guys earlier, it's like, Intel powered like the, Microsoft's, computer hardware infrastructure, the x86, the 386, the 486, the Pentium. And, Apple's running on RISC, and then they switched to Intel. It was like this one company was like basically the CPU for the computing platform in the world. Now that's all changed. And now, but you're seeing this like, could OpenAI be the computing platform like Intel was for these two big companies? It's that to me is remarkable. That's the thing that's made me kind of go like, wow, like that's just for that team. It's an amazing achievement, whether they stay there or, do they become irrelevant over time? Does Apple just like, is Apple what AI, Apple intelligence is AI? And, for the mass adoption, like that's what it is, that might happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shane, I don't know what you think about that, but really cool stuff these guys have pulled off.
Yeah, I think it's an enormous achievement for a company of their with their very short history compared to these big players. But I still think owning the customer in the way that Apple does holds a lot of power. Device manufacturer. I mean, Google pays them billions of dollars every year for the privilege of getting in front of their users. And I think, ChatGPT, I mean, it's a similar case with ChatGPT. Obviously, they've got a lot of leverage going into this. The fact that they're, in such open and active conversations, not just with Google and Apple, but also Microsoft, which I wonder, are they the ultimate beneficiary of this? Because, if you're not creating an account with ChatGPT, and it's all just usage, like how much of that value is accruing to Microsoft? But to go back to your question, I think Apple still holds a lot of power. I mean, they own
in cloud compute.
Sorry,
you mean
in
like
what?
In cloud, like
exactly,
accruing value to Microsoft because every prompt is CPU and GPU on that's a very good thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think Microsoft certainly stands to gain an enormous amount of value from this. Obviously, ChatGPT does too, but not everyone, at least according to what I've read, need to create a ChatGPT account or pay for a paid account, right? But that usage is still going to be ongoing. But Apple, they've been thinking about this for a long time. And to me, this is really kind of par for the course with Apple. They wait to jump in until they think they've perfected the product, right? So they're typically a latecomer, but that's for a very deliberate reason. And it's not to say because they got caught on their back foot, which I think they did, but they often wait, scan the market, see what's out there, and then find some way to come in and one up everybody.
Yeah, and what I really like about the Apple Intelligence launch page that outlines all the features, like obviously the juiciest part of this announcement by far is the partnership with OpenAI, but it only takes up a very small amount of real estate on Apple's launch page. And when you look at everything else that Apple is sort of advertising to really revolutionize this new kind of AI, this new Apple intelligence, what I really like about it, and this goes back to what you initially said, Shane, about Siri, is that it is not only the, buzz around potentially really, really useful and exciting new features, like the idea of maybe text to image generation in iMessage. There is also a lot here about just improving the existing workflows that people are using in their Apple devices. So, you're already improving. You already have these like pretty loyal users. Like I'm a pretty loyal iPhone user, and I can't imagine like kind of breaking from that, just from history, like a long history of usage. And there are things that I am very frustrated with, like the ability to search for messages. I think the search on the Notes app is like not great. Like the Photos app is not great. And those things are like in this demo that they are utilizing basically every advantage they have in terms of their like loyal consumer base, in terms of all the like native apps that they provide that are automatically in each device, that everyone buys, that are compatible across all types of devices. Like, if they can really capitalize on just making Siri great, on making the Photos experience great, on making calendars great, on making the Notes app great, that's already such a huge like promise, on top of the fact that they will also give you this ChatGPT access without any account built into what you buy from them. So I think that's just really, it's a big promise, but something to look forward to, at least for me, as a pretty loyal iPhone user. If that all comes true.
Yeah, I think, you had some good points there. I actually, Apple's pretty much a very unique company. I just have a question, maybe Shane, I don't know if you did any research, or Francesca, yes, Google pays Apple billions of dollars to be the first search engine, but do you think, OpenAI is paying Apple in this deal?
I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know either, but I just, on the basis that this comparison, between sort of the partnership of OpenAI and Apple and Google search in Apple products, just based on the fact that this comparison is just made across the board in pretty much every write-up that I've seen of this, I would have to believe it is a similar structure, but I don't know, because I guess the point you're making is that it is mutually beneficial.
I think that sorry if I stepped on you. If I was the CEO or the product manager, key product manager at OpenAI, and I had a chess piece to move on the table, I'd be like, let's call Apple up. Let's tell them we'll give them as much as Google's giving them per year, but we're going to be your default LLM for the Apple ecosystem. And they went for it. I'd be, it'd be a win, because you're basically locking everyone out and you're sort of locking yourself in. And it proved to be very successful for Google, right? Like if you think about it, when you look at search traffic, this gets to our SEO question we'll talk about later with Perplexity. But if you look at search traffic on the internet, you'll see, hey, 80% mobile. Wow, how much is it iPhone? Like, of that, 60, 70% of it's all iPhone. So it's like, if you think about it, it's like if everyone has an iPhone, or we know there's Android users out, but a significant population is divided between Android and iPhone. The Android market's going to obviously go to Google LLMs, right? So then you're like, so OpenAI's like, we don't have a device. We're not going to bet on Rabbit. So then they do a deal with this. If they are paying Apple to do it, I still think it's a good deal. I think it's like, nevertheless, I think it's a remarkable win for a small startup doing what they're doing. And I think it's a win for AI in general.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to, I think, something that I've mentioned in multiple episodes, where to me, ChatGPT is one of those things where if you use it, you get it right away. But if you never use it, when someone's telling you about it, I think it's kind of hard to conceptualize without using it. It's just one of those things that you see the magic really when you've actually had an interaction with ChatGPT. And that means if you never sign up for an account, if you haven't signed up for an account, like even to this day, or never even like witnessed a demo of it, like my parents, then you'll just never experience really the magic, even as everyone at the dinner table around you is talking it up. And now that it's embedded into the Apple ecosystem, it's like you have no choice but to experience the magic. And almost the great thing is that you won't even know that you are experiencing the magic until the magic happens, because there was absolutely like no additional effort on your part. And that to me is just really powerful for OpenAI. It's as much about keeping the people who are using it very happy and making sure they continue to use it over, Claude and Gemini, but also like who are the new people whose, attentions you can capture. And it's like all the iPhone users now, all the iPad users, like those are the people now.
Yeah, it's like every teenager I think in America. It's like
Google's willing to pay up. I think last year I think Google paid Apple something like north of $20 billion, right, to get their search engines as, on Apple devices. But I think this is a different situation, tapping into AI capabilities at ChatGPT, because for one, Apple has its own browser, right? So, the alternative for them is just to use their own native technology, right? They're not in a similar position now with LLMs. We know Apple's developing their own large language models, but no one knows what they can do. In March, there were talks of a deal between Apple and Google, for Apple to use Google's large language models. And I think the reverse was true in that case. Don't cite me on this because I can't remember the details. But back then, I think, what was going around was that Apple was contemplating paying Google for access to their large language models. So I can see, a situation now where, OpenAI is not paying Apple to get on their devices. It may in fact be the reverse. I just don't have any details. So I think the analogy to the search engine and browsers only goes so far, I think, because Apple's they are behind in the AI race, at least publicly speaking.
Yeah. Well, exciting times. We're going to talk about Perplexity, but I mean, I think we got that out of our system. I think it would be not a smart sort of team move if we didn't talk about it on the day that we're recording our podcast. So let's move over. Let's talk about Perplexity.
I did just see a headline. Elon Musk is threatening to ban Apple devices at X, I believe, if the deal goes through between OpenAI and Apple.
I that's just like it's okay. Well, let's. That's funny. That's funny. I don't know how you ban Apple advice. You'd be banning more than half your traffic, right? It would be so crazy. But he could do whatever he wants, right? Shane, I know you've been using Perplexity for months now. I know, Francesca, you said you're relatively new to it, but you've been doing some research on it, and I've also been using Perplexity. Before we get started, I just kind of want to give a shout out. Like there are a lot of like really, really interesting AI product focused companies out there building, all using ChatGPT, and we know that they're all at risk of getting rolled in as a feature to the bigger companies of the world, right? It's like, and it's really hard to be an entrepreneur probably in this space. And what was really interesting is when I first saw Perplexity, I want to say like right when it got started, I was like, wow, that's going to be a tough fight. But I think they've like, you know what I mean? It was clear that they were sitting on top of OpenAI, ChatGPT. So it's like, and everyone was saying like in late 2023, it's like, you can't be a wrapper app. You can't do this. Like you're going to get annihilated. I would just say like, for the most part, I think Perplexity has shot the rapids on this for the last. I don't know how long they've been around. I can ask the AI, but they've just done a remarkable job, I think, as a young company in this very fast time, and their product has continued to has gotten better to me as I've used it, and it's moved from like one of many interesting AI companies to being like, no, I use this all the time, and I think it's the nuance of the product has gotten better and better, and so I'm excited to talk about it. So, I'll open it up for discussion. I think Francesca's put together like a pretty good outline here, so I don't want to go off script there, but where should we start, Francesca?
Well, I think it makes sense to start at the top and sort of tell our listeners what exactly we are talking about. I think, unlike ChatGPT, Perplexity is not a mainstream term in, any sense of the word, the way ChatGPT has really come to represent just LLMs as a whole, even if you're not using ChatGPT, which I think is interesting in a conversation for another day. But, Perplexity isn't something that I would say is nearly as mainstream as just a standalone term. So, Shane, I think you have us beat in terms of sort of the experience with Perplexity. So I think it would be helpful to sort of start at the top, tell us what Perplexity is, how you can even access it, and maybe sort of a step-by-step example of how someone might use Perplexity in their everyday professional lives.
Yeah. So I think to describe it in terms of comparison, I think on one hand, comparing it to something like ChatGPT is appropriate because after all, it's a chatbot, right? So you are conversing with it. You're able to go back and forth, have a conversation with it. But I think the more appropriate comparison, certainly the comparison I think that Perplexity wants you to make, is between them and traditional search engines like Google. And the main difference there is that we are talking about an AI-enabled search experience. And so what that means, I think, in practical terms, is when you go to Google and you're doing any form of research, whether it's research for a paper or just trying to find a local shop, it's typically a research process, right? So you type in your query and then you get back, pages and pages of different results that it's really ultimately on you to go, and find the answer. Perplexity is different, right? So because it's a chatbot, the first response you get back is a direct answer to your query, right? That's the big difference in the experience. But not only are you getting back a direct answer, you can continue to prompt and ask follow-up questions to Perplexity to go deeper and deeper. And then the biggest, I think, difference to bring ChatGPT back into the equation is you can do a lot of that with ChatGPT. You can ask it questions, it'll give you an answer. But one of my very first complaints using ChatGPT, as groundbreaking as I still think it really is that you're placing a lot of trust in the answers that it's giving you because you don't know where that information is coming from. And that's where I think Perplexity really shines. So it's essentially a ChatGPT experience where every major piece of information that's embedded in your answer is cited with an in-text reference, a little, superscripted footnote, essentially, with the actual source that you can click on and go and read the original material. That's something I think a lot of people have been waiting on. And there's a whole range of issues around what content is actually being fed into these chat agents. We talked last week about things like SEO and a lot of the content that's hidden in the answers that comes back with ChatGPT. Perplexity is really, I think, aiming to solve that problem. You get back a direct answer, and moreover, you can see exactly where that information is coming from. And without going into all the use cases that I'm using it for yet, I mean, we can get into some of those. the more you start to see the connection between the search and the research process with the ability to chat, plus some of the other features, which I think we should get to, the more the possibilities I think open up for you for things, not just like research, but even for, text and image generation. And it's become, pretty, at least with a lot of the work I'm doing now, it's become indispensable to my workflows.
Yeah. And I believe that there is a paid version and a free version similar to pretty much all of these LLMs. Do you sort of notice any differences, like significant differences between the two? Sort of when might one sort of be more useful to a user than the other?
Well, I started off, as I would assume most people do, on the free plan.
Yeah.
And I used it intermittently when it first came out, and I thought this could be really cool. And then, just given the nature of what I was working on, didn't come back to it. But one of the things I noticed was that the quality of the responses I was getting back just wasn't as good, particularly when you think of things like, how well written is this response? How much of this response do I have to sift through to get the information that I'm looking for? And the paid versions of Claude and ChatGPT that I was using, the responses were just higher quality. But what I've realized, over time is that, when you pay for a paid account, the pro account with Perplexity, you can get access to all of those, advanced models.
Right.
You access, the new models from Claude, Opus and Sonnet, for example. You get access to ChatGPT 4 Turbo. You get access to ChatGPT, 4 Omni, which is now free. But you get access to all of these things. So one of the things I've grown to really love about Perplexity is that, when you get a response back, you can have them rewritten using any one of those models. So it's, you're not locked into one particular model or ecosystem. But you can also change the defaults on all of your queries. I think the feature that I probably use the most with the pro account is the fact that you can store all of your threads and collections.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're doing work that's highly repetitive and you need to use the same prompt, for example, over and over again, and let's say that prompt is really long. So there's one particular project I'm working on where my prompt is like probably 500 or 1,000 words. I don't want to type that anew every time I'm going back to do this work. With a pro account, you can save that prompt, do it over and over and over again. So those are some of the features that I really like, but they've also got a new feature, which we can get to, called Perplexity Pages, which I think is just ingenious. And as far as I know, it's not available to free users. I believe it's in beta. But I've started to experiment with it, and basically it's almost like, for lack of a better way to describe it, an AI version of WordPress, where you can create, or Wikipedia, I think is what you brought up, Francesca.
Right. Yeah, that's what I've seen it compared to.
You can create a page or an article really on any topic that you want. And then within the article, highlight certain sections, turn them into tables, highlight sections, come up with images that you want to embed in your article. And then of course share it, which I think is just such a smart move for Perplexity, because it's all user generated content. It's all relying on their technology. The content creation process is supremely easy, and it folds so many of these steps to producing articles and blogs all into one platform, right? So if you're going to make an image, I mean, there are countless solutions out there you can go to get a stock image or generate an image for your blog, but you've got to do it all in different locations. Perplexity brings it all under one roof. And I haven't used it enough to be able to say whether, it makes all that much of a difference for my specific workflow. But you can imagine how, this becomes maybe the next version of like I said, a WordPress, Wikipedia, where people are hosting their own blogs like Substack. You know what I mean? So I just think it's a really smart move for them, especially since what did you say they were? A 55-person team, Francesca?
Yeah, they are a 55-person team, but valued at like $1 billion with increasing amounts of funding at every round, and just, really, I think it has tens of millions of queries in a month. I think that number is growing. It is hard to believe that they are just 55 people. Like 55 people is not a lot. That's like half a lecture hall, like, but that is your entire team running this really what feels groundbreaking in many ways AI tool.
Yeah, I mean, it's just remarkable that they're doing so well against the odds of like being, classified as like wrapping, other people's LLMs. Similar to the conversation we're having about Apple. Apple's got really great products. They have it in everyone's pocket, and they're going to sort of that's the product, and the LLM is the library. I actually think Perplexity is kind of built like a product. I think Shane's brought up a really bunch of great points, that it's like, if you start using it, you could see how just utterly helpful it is versus a Google search. Now, it doesn't rule out the Google search, but it's providing a different way to like to get knowledge. And I think Shane had mentioned that you're able to kind of keep your threads. Now you can have, if you're a pro user, you can have you can create pages, which is an advanced way of threads, by the way. It's the output of a thread, right? It's output of a prompt, and then you can have collections, and these are all, of course, shareable, right? So you can start sharing these, like, my page I shared. It looks like I've got one person that's maybe following it, and that one person might even be me, or 2 views. So it's not a very popular page, but the idea of like you crafting like a really interesting prompt, query that's a common question that people are asking, and maybe you're asking it a very sort of like you're adding a sort of divergent thought to the query, and it creates this great page. And then as it asks you if you have follow-up questions, which is a really quite interesting way of thinking about it, you've suddenly compiled this interesting set of data that totally could be interesting to another person. And think about it, if you save it as a page, Perplexity is not having to regenerate it. It's actually like you're having on one side people prompt it, which costs money to prompt it, but if you're happy with the result, you save it, and that becomes a page, which is just classic HTTP post it to the end user, and they can have it. So I think Perplexity is building web pages in the classic sense. They're having a community prompt it. It creates pages, and it's all at the Perplexity URL on very complex or pop culture topics. That's all there. And I believe, putting my product hat on, that's where you'll probably start seeing an advertising product emerge, right? Is in the pages.
Or a subscription product.
Or a subscription. Well, they already have a subscription product, but I think it's...
to sell subscriptions to your individual pages.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I think it certainly lends itself to like a product strategy for content creators, or it actually calls into question like, what is a content creator in a hyper AI generating world, right? Like, you just might be a really good generator of you might be a whisperer to generators that make the best content, versus like, I can't do that, so therefore I subscribe to you. But I think in our Francesca had put on our discussion board about SEO, but you could see that Google simply just can't like go and do what Perplexity is doing, because they have essentially a $200 billion annualized ad sales product of giving you multiple wrong answers because you just keep clicking. You know what I mean? Whereas Perplexity is giving you the close to the right answer, and it's just not clearly, it's not monetized by advertising. So, I think Perplexity has a really strong chance of being really disruptive, just like how Google was disruptive in its day. Before I leave that topic, though, it's like, Google wasn't really disrupting another, a search behavior when they got started. They were disrupting, like you would use like literally the white pages or the yellow pages to find something, right?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So it was, but here, this is a really interesting thing. I like using Perplexity. I think their product is really, really becoming nuanced and better and better in every way. So, Francesca, where are we going?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I think, I kind of wanted to go back just a bit. Like, I don't use the paid version of Perplexity because I would say for what I need, I get it all with the free version, other than the flexibility of trying out the different models, which I do think is a really nice feature for the pro version. But I'm nowhere near the stage where I would need pages, and I can imagine many use cases for why Perplexity pages would work. There's a reason why Wikipedia is amassing more and more pages of information. People still go to it for just really, I am a big sports fan, and the French Open just happened, and if I want to like see the winners of the past 20 years of like the French Open men's singles and women's singles, I will like go to the Wikipedia page, and it will just like have a table of the winners.
Right.
And so that could easily be something that you ask Perplexity, who are the last 20 winners of the women's singles French Open, and make a page for it. So there's definitely that kind of use case. I'm certainly not there yet. To me, what makes Perplexity stand out, as opposed to not just Google search, which it really wants to, position itself in contrast to, but even as opposed to something like ChatGPT, and I really like Shane's explanation of how Perplexity kind of leverages aspects of ChatGPT and aspects of Google search, because that's really the way I approach it. For someone who's never used Perplexity but is familiar with maybe the ChatGPT based model, like a lot of the difference starts with the prompt already. And what I like about Perplexity is that it doesn't require you as a user to really change or learn a new type of behavior in the way that maybe ChatGPT does for those prompts. And what I mean by that is, most people, I would say, who need to do some kind of research or even just get a question about something that went on in the world answered, will know how to type something into the Google search bar. And what I like about Perplexity is that the prompt that you are really asking it to do, to sort of like give you an answer to, is basically that same prompt. Like what you would normally type into Google, you can type into Perplexity, and you'll get both the like 24 pages of source material, similar to maybe the first page of your Google search, where you can like scroll down the headlines of the websites that might have answers to your question. And you'll get the ChatGPT-esque, human-readable, conversational answer to your question as well. And then at the end of it, you'll get the related questions, again, like Google, where, I asked Perplexity to summarize the, first season of House of the Dragon, since the new season premieres this Sunday. And that's exactly what I got. I got the sort of 20-odd web pages that have various summaries written by, Wikipedia, the Wikipedia page, by Esquire, by any media news reporting outlet. And then I have the answer, which is in plain English, which tells me like the key cast members, such as these people, are returning for the second season. In the first season, this is what happened to them. And then at the end, I got the recommendation of, what were the most memorable moments of season 1, or which character development moments stood out in the first season, etc. And honestly, that is the first prompt where I asked it for a summary. Like, I could have typed that into Google myself,
Yeah.
and then read through each of the articles that the Perplexity answer linked me to, and then I guess mentally crafted basically the same recap that Perplexity just spit out for me on the first go. And that to me is different from Google search, but also very different from ChatGPT, where I was using ChatGPT for things like help me draft an email to a coworker asking about some kind of project, or maybe, suggest some sort of campaign timeline for a new program I'm launching. And so Perplexity really sits in this sort of area of clarity in a way for me, where it knows exactly what it is and what it wants to be, and that helps the user like me know what I can ask of it as well. And then all these new features like Perplexity pages as well, coming into the mix.
Yeah,
I like it for the same reasons. It does have its drawbacks. You were talking about I think your example was that you were if you're looking
restaurant
for a local
recommendations.
restaurant. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And that's one of the biggest drawbacks for me, I think, is just it doesn't seem to do local search very well at all.
Mm-hmm.
But research, on the other hand, I think it's great for, which is why I think this Perplexity pages thing is actually quite big, or it could be quite big for them, because if you think about where so many people are spending so much of their time with AI right now, it's text generation, and I think increasingly research.
Yeah.
And that's what people use the web for. I mean, so much already, which is just research, and they're collapsing those two processes into one, which I think is actually really powerful, because it's just not as much context switching, because to write any form of content for the most part requires research,
right?
And for them to try to be folding it all into one single unified workflow where you can get suggestions like, hey, you left this out in your paper or your page, or here's something else that you should think about refining it with. That's just, for a lot of people, that would actually be a total game changer for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other use case that I had prepared for this was, as Shane said, looking for a restaurant recommendation, and I was specifically thinking about at least my personal workflow of if I'm in a city, particularly if it's a city that I've never been to before or a city I'm not very familiar with, and I drink coffee every morning, I want to know where I can go get coffee. And I open my Google Maps app, and there's a helpful tab that says coffee. And basically that's akin to the coffee shops near me kind of prompt that you would put in the Google search bar. And that is maybe not a use case that Perplexity knows as well as something more research oriented, such as, tell me the history of coffee, or I drink cold brew, so I might be like, what is the origin of cold brew, or where did the first cold brew get brewed or served, or something like that. And that would be a great Perplexity question. But for something like cold brew near me, that's not yet where it is. And so I think that kind of drives home the point I was making a couple minutes ago, which is that the fact that Perplexity makes it easy for me to know what I can go to it for makes me want to use it again. And that is not always the case with some of the AI tools that we've tried out. And we've tried out tens of, even hundreds, I think, Shane, for you, AI tools. And sometimes just the lack of clarity on the user's part, because maybe the product doesn't know what it is itself, it deters me from going back to it. But at least, and if you can extend that workflow, maybe if you're doing research and you don't want to create a page because you have the free account, you might be doing research on, I remember in high school, in our French class, we kind of had to do research on crepes and the different types of crepes and how they're made. And so you could prompt Perplexity, like tell me about the origin of crepes, like give me some recipes, and then go like now turn that into a 1-page report for my French homework. And it's going to do that entire workflow for you. And I think that is really compelling as a product compared to piecemealing all these steps through Google search and then, you know, some maybe note-taking tool, like, you know, format these into like bullet points on Notion and then feed that into ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT writes the report for you. Like Perplexity gave me all of that in basically 3 prompts.
Yeah.
So that's really nice.
What's really remarkable is like what you were saying is like, even in the nascent AI app, you know, consumer app space, like you're even looking for like efficiency there. So like you said, you're like, you know what I mean? It's like this really interesting thing. It's like, you know, and I actually, that's what I maybe it's out of just like laziness, but I feel like Perplexity does solve that kind of problem. Like if I'm researching to write something, I could query Perplexity quite a lot and get source and cite material where you're really not kind of getting that from OpenAI or ChatGPT. And again, it's just like, you know, it's sort of that digital fatigue. Like if I have to move through 3 apps, it starts becoming fatiguey. So I'd rather just, so Perplexity is actually capturing me and keeping me, you know, right where I need to be to like research something, to learn something and discover something. And the thing that I don't know if we mentioned, and I don't know if this is a pro feature, so I'm going to turn the pro feature off here and just ask it something, you know, but it's like if I type something in, it kind of gives me the, it gives me a bunch of sources and it gives me some stuff, and then it gives me images of this query that I've done. But I think in the pro feature, it then allows me to search videos or generate images. So like even in Perplexity, it's like, okay, I wanted to ask about, you know, how to dissect a frog. Great, it's giving me a bunch of diagrams, but now I can actually generate like images of like a how to do it, which I think is really remarkable. And so they're really, that's what I mean. The product is becoming more nuanced. And I think products become more nuanced, and, you know, maybe nuance is another word of saying more delightful. I don't move away from that product, right? Like I end up using it, I habituate on it, and then I become, you know, I'm a paying customer. We do podcasts on it. We tell other people about it. We write blogs about it, and other people learn about it. It really sort of allows this product to kind of come to have this innovative state, whereas Google clearly needs to win this. Like it's theirs to lose. Like they do classic search. Here you're looking for how to dissect a frog. Here's 66 trillion web pages that may actually have that information on that for you. We're not sure, but it may. I think it's just a Perplexity, just to me, is it shortcuts a lot of steps, makes it a little bit more fresh, lots of nuance, lots of opportunities to do follow-on questions. I really actually think this crushes like the Quoras of the world. I don't know if you remember when that got started, because Quora was originally was like, hey, Google just gives me links. Quora was all about questions and answers. You know what I mean? And I really think
I remember.
You know, it's like, I think that, you know, clearly, and there was another product called that Chris Dixon had way back when. I think it was called Hunch. And it was on this kind of like, I had like a research query rather than a search web pages. So, you know, I think that the, you know, folks that are not like in this, in the deep end of AI and looking at all the consumer products, I really think Perplexity's risen to the top here, of all of them, right? You know what I mean? They've punched through, you know, there's a lot of others, there's a lot of other Perplexity-like applications waiting to emerge that are going to be just as cool, just as interesting, might be tackling a different problem. It just so happens Perplexity is risen out, and it's giving some real incumbents a challenge, which is what we want to see. Like we want to see this level of innovation. I think, Shane, you also, do you use it through an API as well?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I have primarily when I'm doing things like data enrichment, and unfortunately, my experience there hasn't really been all that great because when you're referencing, and this is probably more a function of um, my lack of use rather than the capabilities itself. I just found that it was hallucinating quite a bit. I'd reference, something in a spreadsheet or a database and try to go out and get information on the web, using the Perplexity API, and it would come back with information every time. But when I went to investigate it and check it, in quite a few cases, the information was just totally hallucinated. It was, pulling in information on the wrong company or the wrong thing, which immediately made me think I just can't, this is not a solution for me. Because if you're dealing with thousands and thousands of queries and you don't know which ones are wrong, I mean, obviously that's just right. You don't want to be in that situation.
Yeah. And I think that actually leads very, very nicely into the point that I wanted to make as we wrap up. I want, to say that we're still in a stage where, and I believe that Perplexity actually, might say this as a disclaimer, maybe on some fine print or something, or in the LinkedIn posts on its page, or people who write reviews of this, that it is very much still in the stage of you should check, much like Shane did, if this, it will produce these citations. There's no guarantee yet that these citations are real citations, or that the information that is being pulled from these citations, everything is cited in the answer, but these citations might be non-existent, or it might be hallucinating, whatever the situation may be. And so it really brings me back to sort of that use case of, getting a restaurant or local coffee shop recommendation. And, the reason why Google search still is more effective, at least for me, is because Google is kind of implicitly relying on the user, such as myself, like knowing what I want to see, right? And right now, Perplexity isn't answering the question based on what it necessarily thinks, quote unquote, thinks the user wants to see. It's kind of just really basing the answer on the information that it has, i.e. the web. And so that's basically what happened in this query with, restaurant recommendations. It was like citing back to me Yelp reviews. It was citing back to me, various reviews from food blogs, but that is not like necessarily the same thing that I'm looking for when I'm looking for a restaurant recommendation for myself, when I just scroll through all the information available. And so moving forward, in addition to just making sure that the model is more accurate, is not hallucinating, is providing valid citations, that being the immediate next step, I was inspired by your Quora comment, Anthony, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Quora, I believe, had a sort of like community feature of almost verifying the best answer with like upping the answer, and then certain answers would get verified, particularly for maybe like a programming question or something like more scientific. And I think that kind of community feature, like it's probably already being internally done at Perplexity, but there is still this general doubtfulness across the board with LLMs about, hallucinations, about, really needing to double check things. The models like ChatGPT may even contradict itself in the same conversation. And so I think something like Perplexity, just because I was inspired by your Quora comment earlier, like a community feature, maybe that is the draw of Perplexity pages, much like Wikipedia has become this massive internet community project where people are correcting each other, people are questioning information, and I can only imagine Perplexity benefiting from something like that to get to a point where maybe, it beats Google when it gets to a point that it can give the user an answer better than the user can like find for themselves.
Yeah, they did have. Oh, you want to go, Shane?
No, go ahead.
Okay, sure. Sorry. So yeah, I think Stack Overflow also had that sort of like, this is answer.
Yes, yeah,
right?
it did.
It's like finally, like,
right.
You're programming and you're just like, what's the answer? And finally, like, someone's answered it. So I think that the community feedback is really powerful. If you're Perplexity and you're a product manager and you're like, I have these power users that are sort of like putting in these complex prompts and they're outputting, they're making pages, and those pages actually become useful for end users. It's such a killer feedback loop to the model, right? So like you can see how Perplexity could eventually win if they are like, no, these pages are working. People are like they're giving us, they're getting traffic, B, they're getting validation, or C, they're getting comments, or et cetera. And so what happens is they have this whole new first party data set that no one else has. Wikipedia, I've had my battle with Wikipedia since it got started. It was a huge contributor. It just turns out like both in Reddit and in Wikipedia, it's like the moderators are so aggressive that you almost have no chance to like actually, compete.
Oh yeah, Reddit is this, own kind of, I don't even know, like landfill of information that
which is funny because
work with.
Yeah, and there's hallucinations in there, and those hallucinations are like, no, this Reddit mod is like smarter than everybody, and he or she will never allow anyone to actually post to this page, even if it's like a sports score. So, hallucinations happen with humans. They happen with search engine crawls. They happen with LLMs. My current position is, I'm going to be hybrid for the reasons that you pointed out. Like I could like search a map and see the best place to eat. And I'm going to use Perplexity for things where I feel like I'm looking to have a conversational knowledge quest, which I'm not going to do with Google, right? And and more often or not, I find myself in that sort of knowledge quest than I am just looking for search links, right? So Perplexity is really, to me, in this AI race, doing a great job. Their product's getting better. Shane, you should definitely give us what you think as we kind of close this podcast out. We're running late here, so I'll give you the last word.
I'll just jump in before Shane brings us home. That I, like you, Anthony, will stay hybrid. For me, so you would use Perplexity when you're looking for that more conversational sort of information or knowledge sharing. For me, I would use Perplexity, or I do use Perplexity when I know that Perplexity can help me get to the final output that I need it to be in. And so that was similar. I'm not in French class in high school anymore, but I use that example of, if you can get to the sort of one-page report on the history of crepes and like some traditional recipes, like I think Perplexity is a great way to do that. I would say something like, if I want to know maybe the history of a certain algorithm and then like share that with my coworker or a client that wants it in sort of plain English, like that's kind of the use case for Perplexity that I like. I like that it can take me a step further than Google search does in terms of just providing me a final output.
Yeah.
And
because I think one of the big questions for people out there is they're now becoming increasingly aware of all these different alternatives, and I'm reminded of the streaming wars when they started getting really hot. And the fact that you've only got so much budget to spread around to so many different services. So for a lot of people, you've got to pick your favorite. And now we've got Gemini Advanced, you've got Claude, you've got ChatGPT, you've got Perplexity. If you guys had to choose just one, does Perplexity change what you've discovered is capable of now? Does it change your decision? Like what would you pick? And it doesn't have to be from just those alternatives either, but like if you could only pick one, what would you pick?
Is that a question to answer right now? Or is it?
I'm curious.
I didn't know if that was for the listeners, but
I'm curious if you had to pick. Like, what would you guys?
Well, I mean, down the line, and there was this really, I mean, we've been saying this since day one, that what any of these AI tools look like now will not be what they look like in a year or 2 years. And I think we're rapidly approaching a point where the three tools that you just mentioned are going to just diverge. All of them are going to diverge, whereas right now they all feel like they're still on the same path. Right now, for what I use these tools for the most, I would not pick Perplexity over ChatGPT or Gemini. I would probably go like ChatGPT, then Gemini, to be used in the same way as ChatGPT and then Perplexity. However, if I want to predict based on the sort of divergence that I foresee happening among the tools, I think in a year's time, Perplexity is going to be what I default to over the two of them.
Anthony, what about you?
I mean, Perplexity, it's kind of a, do I want to eat an apple or an orange kind of question? Because I think like ChatGPT is really like bare metal prompt, and Perplexity is wrapped in a product. So I'd probably stick with the bare metal right now. But I kind of align myself with Francesca. I think like ultimately I want something really productized that understands and the product is delivering exactly what I need it to do. Whereas I think ChatGPT is like bare metal. You can coerce it into what you want, and it takes a little bit more sort of persuasiveness. You'll get what you need. It won't get you the citing and stuff like that. So, it's depending. If I'm like a research assistant, I'd probably just go with Perplexity. If I'm like a broader, more full spectrum person, ChatGPT will work for me.
Yeah. I think my answer is pretty much the same. I mean, now, I think you're totally right, Francesca. It depends on what you're doing.
Right.
But I think anyone doing any type of content writing, historically, I would have very clearly picked Claude as the answer for content writing. That's not always been the case. There was a time where I canceled Claude. I was pissed off because it kept refusing to write stuff. Then I went back when they released, the new models. But now I think if I were just purely content writing and doing a lot of research, which again, I think any writing just inherently involves research, I would default to Perplexity over Claude now. And it's really because, like, again, you're folding in that research workflow directly into the editing workflow, which I think is just, really powerful the more that I think about it. And even though the output is not as well written as what you'd get with Claude, I think responsible use of these tools means you need to be going back and editing what you're getting back anyway, right? So for me, I prioritize, am I getting the right ideas into this piece, whether it's an essay or a web page, rather than is it being written as well? Because I think your job as the human is to make sure that it reads well. And the AI's job is like serving up the information that you may want to include, But the final thing, have you read all the hubbub about Google, and their own version of this, the AI overviews?
I mean, Google feels
some of the
like
responses that have been coming out.
Yeah, it's been very troubled, but Google seems to be like the grandfather of a lot of this AI research, but their research is really superior, it seems, and their applied research has been really sort of lukewarm at best right now. So, I haven't seen
for listeners who don't know what we're talking about, Google, their own, I'll just call it version of Perplexity, is these AI overviews, where it's an AI generated response to your search query, where that is a direct answer, much like Perplexity would provide. But there have been, instances of people getting back responses that are really just insane. Like one famous example, a user was asking about how to make the cheese stick to a pizza that they were making, and the response that the AI generated from Google was add Elmer's glue to it. There was another where it said, like, you should eat a certain amount of rocks because rocks contain, essential minerals. So they all hallucinate. I mean, those are some pretty bad gaffes, I think. But
Yeah.
Perplexity hallucinates all the time, which is why I think like if you're going to use it, understand the UI. Click on the sources. One of the things that I didn't realize until I was using it so often was that you'd search for some term, and then you click on all the sources, which you can remove, by the way, and see that it was pulling in information from things that are totally irrelevant. So I would familiarize yourself with the UI, particularly in terms of how it's pulling in that information, because Perplexity is not immune from all these crazy, hallucinations.
Well, there's Perplexity. I mean, we've covered the exciting news with Apple and OpenAI, and now we've talked about Perplexity. Hopefully, people are inspired or curious to kind of go check out Perplexity, use the free one. If they're super inspired, buy an account.
Yeah. Let us know what you think.
Exactly. Totally let us know what we think. We're going to post this. We're going to post our podcast to YouTube, Apple, Spotify. You can find us at Future Proof Podcast by CoAI. You can also get our URL at getcoai.com. And we're going to be back the following week, hopefully talking about some cool stuff in AI. Francesca, did I miss anything? Shane?
No.
If you want to know how we are using Perplexity, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out.
Yeah. Let us know. Thanks a lot. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop.
See ya.